We're going to go ahead and get started. As I said, this is a Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness 101. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kelly Kravitz, and I'm the Director of the Highly Mobile and At-Risk Student Programs Division at the Texas Education Agency.
And I'm Debbie Solcher, Central Texas Regional Administrator with the Office of the Governor's Child Sex Trafficking Team. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. We're thrilled that you're here. Today's presentation, we've got an hour presentation. We do have time at the end for your questions. Also, feel free to use the chat. We will be providing information for you to increase your knowledge about the mandatory child abuse and neglect reporting policy, which includes human trafficking prevention and awareness. You're going to receive some legislative highlights and updates. You're going to learn about some risk factors concerning school-age human trafficking and receive information on resources. So this very much is a 101. This is a high-level overview. We're not going to take a deep dive into any one piece of this work, but we are going to give you a nice high-level overview with where you can go for more information. Also, to ground this work, this is actually a part of a larger webinar series that we are doing. And this is in collaboration with the Governor's Office, as Debbie is on our team with the Child Sex Trafficking team, Title IV in Region 14, Region 12, DFPS, the Texas School Safety Center, TASB. There are many stakeholder groups working together to increase awareness about the human trafficking prevention requirements and policy. There is a lot in this work, and there's a lot for schools to know and be informed of. And so as a part of that initiative and as a part of that stakeholder collaboration that we are doing, we are launching and have launched a webinar series. And this is actually our third presentation in the series. The first Friday of every month from 10:30 to 11:30, we are providing information. All of these presentations will be recorded and stored on the Highly Mobile and At-Risk Student Program Division webpage at TEA. So if you've missed it or missed past presentations, we want you to go back there. Also, if there's folks that you know should have been a part of today or you'd love to share the information with, we'll make sure that you have a link to that information and can share that with your colleagues. Also, our next series will be next month, and next month, January, is Human Trafficking Prevention Awareness Month. So on the 8th, we have a presentation on internet safety. And at the end of the month, on I believe it's the 29th, we do have a presentation with survivors, a survivor panel that the Governor's Office is putting together. So we've got 2 presentations up for the month of January, which we're excited about, again, just in recognition of Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month. And with that, I'm going to go ahead to turn it over to Debbie, who's going to talk a little bit more about our why and give you some really good background to set up today's presentation. Go ahead, Debbie.
Thanks, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for a discussion on this very important topic and problem in our great state of Texas. In 2016, the Child Sex Trafficking team partnered with the University of Texas to do some research around what we were looking at as far as numbers in the state. And so they came up with the number of 79,000 youth at any given day are being trafficked in the state of Texas. And this is not based on hard numbers of youth that were actually identified as a victim or survivor, but more from a vulnerability perspective. So when you look at the vulnerabilities that would increase a risk of trafficking in youth, then they extrapolated that information into what is going on in the landscape of youth in the state of Texas and came to the conclusion that on any given day, 79,000 kids are being exploited. So obviously that's a huge number, and we want to do what we can to increase identification and intervention with those youth. So to start us off, we'll just kind of look at the legal definitions. And while this webinar is specifically talking about sex trafficking, I wanted to include a little bit of information about the legal definition for labor trafficking as well, since we know that there are different types of trafficking, human trafficking. So labor trafficking, you see on the left-hand side, verbs for what trafficking could mean. It could look like transporting, enticing, recruiting, harboring, providing, or obtaining by any means through the force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of forced labor and for services. So to point out, it doesn't have to be a transport. People normally think that, you know, the definition of trafficking is you're actually moving someone from point A to point B, but it does not have to be that sort of transportation mode specifically or literally in order for it to be considered exploitation. Okay, so for the purpose of sex trafficking, same verbiage by the means of force, fraud, or coercion with persons being trafficked or exploited in the things that you see here under the becoming the victim of a sexual assault, an aggravated sexual assault, promoting prostitution, compelling prostitution, and the word prostitution obviously is, you know, an offense word. However, we know that children cannot consent to sex under the age of 17, so they cannot be arrested for prostitution, although they have been. We have been working really hard in the state to ensure that that doesn't occur, and is really not happening that much anymore, but you know, they cannot consent to that. So anybody who traffics a child or who engages in any purchasing of children for their own benefit is also engaged in trafficking. So it's really important to note that buyers are also included as traffickers, as well as the person who is trafficking that particular youth. So I wanted to just give a little picture here, a little Venn diagram, if you will, over why this is important to you guys, because sexual abuse in the form of child abuse is something that you guys are mandated reporters of, and exploitation and trafficking actually fall under the umbrella of abuse. And so I wanted to just give a little snapshot on how you might be viewing this. So if you have a child who is being molested by her father, then we know that that's sexual abuse. If Sophie becomes befriended by a man online and she's being groomed and she sends him nude photos, then she has been exploited. We know there's a lot of sexting going on in schools. Hear stories about that all the time. And then let's say that Sophie's new boyfriend decides that he wants to arrange some dates or have her do something with other people in exchange for money, then he is now trafficking Sophie. So trafficking and exploitation are underneath that umbrella of child abuse. So that's why we are working towards schools being trained and looking for what's going on in the exploitation trafficking realm and how that pertains to abuse, and then reporting on that abuse. So this is an old report, data pulled from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, or Polaris. And in 2017, we had over 829 reports in the city of Houston alone for trafficking, with a total of over 2,000 in the entire state. So this was 2017. So we have definitely seen an increase since then. I'm sorry, I don't have more updated but you can see on the heat map where the concentration of calls tend to come from. They're, you know, kind of that 35 corridor. A lot of work being done in the Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and Fort Worth area in terms of identifying and creating collaboratives to address this issue. We know it happens everywhere else, as you're going to hear. In rural areas, no place is exempt from anything happening in your backyard. Okay, next slide. So we have the child sex trafficking team has partnered with West Coast Children's Clinic out of California to utilize their validated screening tool for trafficking. It is not a diagnostic tool, it's just a screening tool. So it's an information integration tool. So you would have information about a child, you would fill out this screening tool, and it would give you a continuum of concern of whether they're being trafficked or not. So there's a no concern, a possible concern, or a clear concern. If you are in the clear concern category, you're a mandated reporter, and therefore you are making a report to DFPS and other entities that you might be reporting to as part of your policy. And if there's a possible concern for this youth, then perhaps there's something going on and you need to watch that youth and provide some protective factors, services to hopefully avert exploitation if they're not already being exploited and you just don't have enough information to determine that. And then obviously the no concern. So from March to September of 2020, we have performed screenings, over 31,000 youth, 10 to 24 years of age, which is very exciting. So we have lots of different agencies that are involved in the screening. A lot of those that deal with high-risk youth, our drop-in centers, our emergency shelters, other agencies that are not part of our grantee system, but are seeing at-risk youth, TJJD, which is the Juvenile Justice Department. So that means probation departments are utilizing this tool. And also DFPS is screening in the 5 major urban areas right now with hopefully a system in place to screen in other areas, and they have a rubric of their high-risk youth that they are screening. We know that the vulnerabilities for youth being trafficked are TJJD involvement and DFPS involvement. So this is very exciting that we're able to partner with these systems in order to screen youth. So I wanted to just give a little overview of the types of exploitation that we see. I think most people tend to believe that trafficking is that kidnapping, they've come to someone's home or they find a kid in a mall and they kidnap them and then they're, chaining them up somewhere and having them perform sex acts. And while that definitely occurs, it is really rare in most communities. We see more familial exploitation and the Romeo exploitation. So familial exploitation is where youth are exploited by their parents, their caregivers, any other family member that they might be involved with. And this is very predominant. It's very hard to determine numbers on this because the youth do not see themselves as being exploited. I mean, if they were starting to be exploited at the age of 8 or younger, they don't know any different. So they're not going to identify us as victims. And then Romeo exploitation, where there's been seduction by some boyfriend or girlfriend, usually an older party that they've come into contact with, and that person is grooming them. They're finding out where their vulnerability is. Are they having problems with their mom? They're going to be that mom, they're going to be that dad, and they're going to step in and figure out what that vulnerability is and provide that, and then move that child into trafficking. And this could be done over a period of years. So it's hard to track as well because again, the youth is usually in love with them. It's their boyfriend or their girlfriend. And so they are not seeing themselves as being exploited. Then there's also guerrilla exploitation, where it may start out as a Romeo, or actually just someone forces that person into exploitation by threats or violence to themselves or someone else in their family. Sometimes they get involved in a stable, which is what the name is for the group of girls that a particular pimp might be utilizing. And so they get in and that becomes their family. And so they're scared to leave because they're worried about what's going to happen to the other girls, or they're being threatened, and of course the recipient of violence as a result of their exploitation. And then peer-to-peer recruitment. So it could be that youth are exploiting other youth. Lots of times it may start out as a Romeo exploitation or even guerrilla exploitation. And then that person says, hey, if you don't want to do this anymore, you don't want to have those 10 guys a day, then if you can find some other people to come in and take up some of that slack, then, you can just be my girlfriend and you can help me out. And then, we'll have other people underneath you. And so there could be some peer-to-peer recruitment going on in your schools. Gang-based recruitment, seeing a big increase in gangs exploiting youth. It's much easier for girls to be turned over than it is drugs. It's safer for the gang members to utilize humans in that capacity, rather than it is to worry about getting busted for drugs or something like that. So there's a lot of money to be made in on the gang side in exploitation. Of course, internet enticement, social media, chat rooms. We're seeing a really big increase in this right now because of COVID, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But kids are being groomed in video game chat rooms, as well as other social media forms. And as soon as we figure out what's going on, they create a new app or they create some new technology that is easily hidden by parents, because we are the immigrants in this scenario, and we don't always understand the language of what's going on. Of course, survival sex, kids that are, runaways. The LGBTQ community is extremely vulnerable in this area, as they are, sometimes outed by their families. They don't want to have anything to do with them because of their perceived lifestyle, and so they are on the street. And what do? They have to sleep, they have to eat, and so a lot of them turn to survival sex. That they're being exploited. They are receiving a benefit. Illicit sexually oriented businesses like massage parlors, things of that nature, and then also cantinas, which is not on here. So we do see a lot going on with the younger girls in the background, that back room of the cantina, and so we partner heavily with TABC for working on in that area. Okay, so warning signs and risk indicators. As we are in these crazy times right now, there's a lot of factors that are attributing to additional exploitation of kids. School closures, not being able to go and be around other people, being able to talk to friends, that's that isolation that's going on. So they're turning to those social media outlets as a way to connect with other people, and that's not always a good thing. Disruption of routines, and home is not always safe. People are stressed out. There's a lot of domestic violence. We've seen an increase in that with our shelters and advocates around different areas of the state. Increased burdens on the family, which creates that stress, economic hardships. If people are released from their jobs, having to take care of other family members, fewer resources and services. A lot of shelters have shut down and are not taking people anymore because they're worried about COVID exposure, or they've had some sort of COVID exposure in their facility and they've needed to shut down. So this puts more people out on the street. And then, of course, the alcohol and drug misuse that all of this stress is creating, which we know is just a huge cycle for the domestic violence and potential exploitation. Additional challenges with the quarantines and, the shutdown of normal activity. So routines are being disrupted. And then the increased internet use. So as kids are having to be on the internet because of school, more entertainment options online because they can't get out and do things. And then they're just looking for that connection. And we know we already face the battle of kids connecting online. That's their mode of connection. And so it's just really increased that vulnerability for exploitation. And then also the declines we see in those coping skills and those protective factors that we're not able to assist with, and then be there and have kids have someone to count on, because we know that relationships are the most important thing. So some warning signs. Recognizing warning signs of human trafficking is the key step to identifying victims. So it's really important for everyone to know what they're looking for. I think that there's a misperception that kids are going to come up to you and say, hey, I'm being trafficked or I'm being exploited. First of all, they don't know what those words mean. And if you said, are you being exploited? They're going to say no, sometimes spitting at you as they do that, because that is their boyfriend. And you certainly wouldn't say, is your parent exploiting you? Because that would be highly inflammatory language. And so you're not going to get anywhere. So just kind of understanding what those warning signs are so that when you see situations that you're thinking, wow, something is just not right with this. You guys are around kids. I'm preaching to the choir. I'm an ex-educator for 17 years. I mean, you are intimate with what's going on with these kids and with their families. And so you're in a very unique position to identify things that might be happening. You see those subtle changes going on in behavior. And back in the day when I was teaching, I didn't know anything about human trafficking. This never would have been on my radar. And so those kids that are sitting in your seats that, are not being able to attend for some particular reason, or you see something odd in their behavior, there's something else going on. And it's not always ADHD or ADD, which is kind of where we would have gone in the past looking for some, answer as to what's going on. And it could be something that we need to intervene with in this arena. So victims who are at risk. Okay, sorry, missed a slide there. Go ahead. Okay, so some of the warning signs that you might see in youth that are being exploited are changes in their friends, their behavior, and their attitude. So if you have someone in your school that normally was really friendly and outgoing, and all of a sudden they start wearing a hoodie over their head and they don't want to talk to anybody, and they don't hang around with the same people anymore, their grades are going down, something's happening, right? So we don't know what it is, but there's something going on. So this is where you would want to kind of start delving into, it's not a behavior problem. So what's happening to you instead of what's wrong with you. So it's kind of that paradigm shift in how we're looking at a person and meeting them where they are. Increased absences from school. Sometimes kids don't go to school because they're being trafficked on a particular day and they're not showing up, or they have just run away and they're maybe in a situation where they're being trafficked for a period of time. So knowing what's going on with kids when they're away from school, and being concerned about that, and who do you contact and how do you find things out. If they're isolated from their family, friends, if they, normally had some sort of hobby or participated in an outdoor sport and they're not doing that anymore, then, trying to find out what's going on. If they have multiple phones or social media accounts and you happen to know about that, you may not be aware of the social media accounts unless they're telling you or you hear from friend of a friend kind of thing. But, if they are observed with multiple phones, that's usually an indication that something is happening. Where did they get that other phone? Why do they have a second phone? Clothing, if that is suggestive or seasonally inappropriate. I heard a survivor speak one time who talked about in June, she would wear a sweatshirt, or May to June, because they were still in school in June, she would have a sweatshirt on because she was hiding some sort of injury that she had obtained as a result of being trafficked, and no one ever asked, why are you wearing a sweatshirt in May? What's going on? And this can also be, maybe they're cutting and, they don't want someone to see that. Well, that's kind of something that you would want to know. Why are you cutting? What's going on? That's a behavior that could be indicative of something happening. And then a sudden appearance of luxury items. If you know a youth in your school is sporting around a Gucci purse or something that's kind of outside their price range, wearing things that are outside their price range, coming up with money that you're like a little suspect on, I didn't think they would have access to that, then that's a question for you to ask, in your mind, where did you get that? And maybe I need to check in and see what's going on. If they have a lot of gift cards or excess amount of cash in their possession that traffickers could be giving them, because they don't give them lots of times money, but they'll give them gift cards, or if the youth is engaging in exploitation on their own, they may have the excess amount of cash. If they're being trafficked by a third party individual, that person is usually taking their money, but they may have some sort of gift card. Presence of branding or tattoos. So if someone pops up with a new tattoo, understanding what that means. Lots of times these youth are branded because the pimps are letting other people know this is my property. And they're also letting that youth know you are my property. So, you know, they'll have tattoos like daddy, or sometimes they have barcodes like inside their lip or on the back of their neck, but some sort of indication. Certainly, if you see several kids in your school pop up with the same sort of tattoo, that would be a huge flag, because maybe there's been some peer-to-peer recruiting going on, and there's a situation where there's a little ring happening in your school. If you see or come into contact with a controlling caregiver or authority figure, I hear stories of traffickers going into schools and seeing kids, you know, checking kids out. You know, the front office staff is not aware that, you know, of what to look for. But if kids stop being able to talk for themselves and someone else is taking over for them, and they're never, you know, if they show up to the nurse and then all of a sudden a parent or caregiver shows up and the kid never gets to talk about their health, something's going on. And so we need to, you know, pay attention to that. And then maybe there's, you know, someone who has a history of what people are calling sexual promiscuity, and don't just, you know, write that off to, you know, they're kind of sleeping around or, you know, whatever. It could be that they have been trafficked, that has gotten out. There's then they're being teased about being, you know, promiscuous, and have that label, and then you have some bullying going on as a result of that. That can also make them, even if they are not being trafficked at the time, if they are sexually promiscuous, then that can also put them in a position of being exploited as well. So, you know, watching out for those kinds of things. A youth having a history of sexual promiscuity at the age of 13 or 14 is not something that is really normal. Something's going on, right? Either whether they're being trafficked or not, there may be some other sort of abuse happening. Okay, so who is at risk? So basically anyone who has a cell phone or any sort of technology that is internet capable is at risk. Certainly every kid is at risk anyway, but if you have a device, you are at risk. Predators spend days trolling Facebook, Instagram, any way that they can figure out what's going on with the kid, looking for those vulnerabilities. Somebody that's posting a lot about I'm having this fight with my dad, or I can't go out, and they're feeling locked in, then that trafficker is going to look at those posts. They're going to go, oh, I can step in here, I can groom this person because I'm going to fill whatever need they have at the time. And it's just an easy way for them to troll and figure out who's having some issues. So anytime you have anyone on the internet, they're at risk. And you'll hear more about that in the next webinar, I think in January, about internet safety. So victim vulnerabilities, the additional circumstances that might make a child more vulnerable to trafficking or exploitation, homeless and runaway youth. And we have a lot of homelessness going on right now, particularly with COVID. And, you know, as I said before, shelters are shutting down, and so they're not taking new kids, and it's placing them in a position of, you know, perhaps having to engage in that survival sex. Again, the technology and social media access, the LGBTQ community is really high risk. Mentioned already, juvenile justice and foster care, those with significant cognitive disabilities. And that's one of the reasons why we have that particular piece called out in the training requirements, because kids who have cognitive disabilities is, you know, if you know someone's having problem with a boyfriend in their school or in your school, there's some violence happening, that can also lead to exploitation. And then of course, gang affiliation. So why don't kids ask for help? We talked about some of that. Most of the reason is because they don't see themselves as victims. That's what we hear most of the time. In the West Coast Children's Clinic validation study, Over 75% of those kids did not see themselves as being exploited at the time that that tool was, the screening tool was being validated. Limited family and social support. So they may not have anyone that they can turn to. And we know that relationship is the most important thing as a protective factor. Not knowing what is normal for, about sex for survival and abuse. It's not something that we talk about a lot. And unfortunately, schools, I don't know how you guys do it all the things that you have to do, teach the 3 R's and then keep kids safe. It's very difficult, but with all the, programs out there teaching about, dating violence and things like that, kids don't know what is normal and what's not normal unless they're taught. So if they get a bad experience, then that can kind of shape and leave them open for further exploitation. Being confined or monitored, false promises of security and love. I mean, that's where that Romeo pimp comes in. He's telling them, hey, you can help me get some money. We'll have a place to live. It'll be awesome. I love you and all this. And then, that child gets groomed in, and then they're just helping out at that point, right? They're working for a better life. Obviously the arrest histories for juveniles, and then the shame and blame that goes on when they realize that something's not quite right. So they have that trauma bonding with their trafficker, very hard to break that. But if they get that glimmer of something's not quite right, or I want to do something different, then there's a shame and blame going on around that behavior. Sometimes they feel like they walked right into it. I chose that. And so this is my choice. And I can't blame anybody for it. And then fear and distrust of systems. So we know that those kids in TJJD and also DFPS are re-victimized all the time. And so there's a big fear and distrust of big systems. And so, of course, they don't trust law enforcement because the pimp is over there telling them you're going to get arrested. Sometimes they do. And so who's suffering, right? And then we've just reinforced what that trafficker is telling them. And then obviously threats of violence against family and friends. Had a girl talk about how she was trafficked from the age of 7th grade all the way through high school because they were threatened that they were going to grab her younger sister and bring her into the ring. So she continued to be exploited for a number of years because of that fear. Okay, so who are these traffickers? So usually this is some good dialogue when we're in person, but you can see, young, innocent, different races, different genders, those were all traffickers. So these are the sentences that they received. One of them still waiting for trial, but they can look like anybody. They could be your next door neighbor. They can be the high school football star at your school. Any of them can be traffickers. So we're not just looking for a particular stereotype out there. So if you have that image in your mind, it's not the case. It could be anybody. And so some of the news things that we've heard about how trafficking impacts schools, specifically in Pearland, there was someone arrested for coercing kids into prostitution. In Friendswood, I mean, this is happening not just in these big urban areas, guys. It's happening all over. I hear about houses in these smaller rural communities where no one's asking questions, right? And because everybody knows everybody, sometimes that kind of hides what's actually going on. Pair of Killeen ISD teachers arrested in prostitution sting. So it's not only kids in your school, it's not only parents in your community, it's also could be the teachers in your school. So no one is exempt from this. So we just have to be really careful about how we're looking to identify a problem. Okay, identification and reporting. You guys, again, are so essential as people who are seeing kids every day, working with families and understanding what's going on and seeing those subtle changes that happen. You see these guys more than anyone else. And so it's really, really a great opportunity for you guys to assist in this. Traffickers could be using your school as a place to recruit victims. I hear about kids going to school, leaving at lunch, turning some tricks, going back to school and being there for the rest of the day. I can't even imagine how anybody is getting any work done with that kind of stuff going on in their life, but it's happening. Students could be recruiting other students at your school. Adults could be recruiting people on your campus. Hear stories about someone went into a school and made friends with a group of parents, was providing them expensive cell phones, and then trying to recruit their kids. Traffickers could be, of course, texting or contacting students while they're attending school, hence pulling them out, saying, you know, I have something for you to do at lunchtime. I'm going to come pick you up. So just kind of knowing what's going on in your school. And then obviously we talked earlier about using their position of authority to come in and contact kids and be around kids on your campus. And then, you know, perhaps the staff in the front office don't really know kind of what they should be looking for. And then you guys having the procedures and policies in place to prevent students from being victims of human trafficking. And then lastly, you guys are so important because we did another study last year with UT, kind of a follow-up to that first one we did in 2016. And this was an interview research study performed on kids that mostly were in TJJD, but they had to meet certain risk factors in order to be part of the study, but they were interviewed. And you can see here that what came out of that was that individual circumstances and the environmental circumstances that the kids were involved in, which are things we talked about before, led to their feeling like they had some efficacy about their life and were more easily drawn into exploitation. Relationship was the key factor of kids not being exploited. They need someone to listen to them, someone to believe in them, someone to trust them. And if these kids go in and out of the life, sometimes up to 7 times before they plan to get out. If they get out, we want to try to intervene because the lifespan for youth that are being exploited is you know, not very high, about 18 or 19. So it's a sad situation, and we need to understand that we can by not judging and meeting kids where they are, understanding that there may be something else happening and giving them the opportunity to open up, and then us knowing what to do, right? So you guys, I can't say enough about how important you are, and the partnership that we have with TEA and with schools in the state is just phenomenal. And I'm really excited to be a part of that. And thank you for all you do for our kids. And I'm going to turn this back over to Kelly to talk about reporting and resources.
Great. Thank you, Debbie, for that thorough overview, that excellent and very informative presentation about trafficking, just helping to increase our awareness about what we should be looking for and seeing, and what this horrific crime is and is about. That was very, very helpful and just provides really good context. In this next part of the presentation, I'm going to go over what are some of the requirements that you all as school leaders are required to have in place, as well as training that you're required to have. And so just want to make sure that folks know about these things. So the Texas Administrative Code 61.1051. This is where all of our child abuse, our mandatory reporting, which includes human trafficking, lives. So the policy expectations for schools is here. And so some things that are outlined. Districts are to develop and clearly articulate their policies concerning child abuse, maltreatment, and trafficking. You are to develop protocols and procedures for identifying and reporting suspected abuse and neglect. It is required that every school personnel is trained. And so there's required training for all staff on these topics. It's also a requirement. There's age-appropriate anti-victimization and prevention programs are made available for students. And it's also a requirement that this information is included in handbooks that are provided to students as well as families. Now, out of the last legislative session, children with significant cognitive disabilities was added. And so that needs to be a part of the training and in information that's made available is how does this look in the case of children who have significant cognitive disabilities. And something else that was added in the last legislative session was new training requirements for school board of trustee members, as well as for superintendents. And due to COVID and a lot that has been going on, there has been some changes to the requirements and to the time, not to the requirements, but to the timelines. And so school board members are required to take 1 hour of training every 2 years. And this was initially effective in May, but it was waived and moved back to January 31st. Superintendents need to get 2.5 hours of training every 5 years. And that effective date was in August of 2020. Something that we've been doing with our stakeholder groups, as stakeholder group is really working to identify where is this training available and who's providing it. And we're working on some resources to get this information out and make it more readily available to you. We have an excellent training that is in the gateway. As is, it does not meet the superintendent and school board of trustee training requirements, but it is an excellent piece, specifically on human trafficking, that can help to fulfill these requirements that everybody has as a part of new employee onboarding. One piece that is missing from our gateway module is the general child abuse and neglect information. We're responsible to identify signs and symptoms of all forms of abuse and neglect. And so right now we are just really addressing the trafficking. And so district leaders and school folks still need to take other training that's provided by DFPS, Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas, and there's other entities that provide that training. But the Gateway module is available specifically to support the trafficking piece. And in the future, we will be updating our Gateway module so that it can be kind of a one-stop shop for all of the training requirements that are required concerning child abuse and neglect, including human trafficking. So just as a reminder, every educator is a mandatory reporter. And so if there is an emergency, you need to call 911 or a law enforcement immediately. If there is a heightened concern, you need to contact the DFPS hotline. And if it's a hunch or a worry, something that's less urgent, that's when you can make your report to Texas Abuse Hotline online. And as Debbie was mentioning, because we are in this time, it looks different, right? In the virtual learning environment, the signs and symptoms of abuse and neglect, and maybe it's different than when the students were in your presence every day at the school building. And so we need to be doing our due diligence. We know that reports to the DFPS abuse hotline are down at this time. And we want to remind you to do your due diligence. And we have made some additional tools and resources available to support you and want to make sure you're aware of what those are. Really quickly, before I get into some of the tools and resources that are available, we did want you also to bring your attention to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. as well as the cyber tip line through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And what you need to do is make your mandatory reports to DFPS. But both of these lines are a good place to go for additional information, or if there's something that you think is not getting, where action is not being taken, or there's something else where we need to make sure and make another report and flag the hotline, we would want you to make a call to the National Human Trafficking Hotline and to the cyber tip line. So this is another entity in which you can follow up with. Always contact DFPS, and then you can also contact these national hotlines as well. Okay, I'm going to transition to talking about some resources. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of requirements, the policies, procedures, protocols, training. So we've created a checklist that spells out these requirements, and we did this in collaboration with the Title IV initiative at Region 14. And so this tool, as you can see, a screenshot here, it is linked, and you can also find this available on our webpage, and we'll make sure and let you know where that information is housed. You can find what are all the different requirements, and then who is required, and then where you can go for those resources. So it's broken out by school personnel, superintendent, and school board of trustee, as well as the different resources that are available. And it does spell out all of the requirements. So wanted to make sure that you know this is available. I did mention the gateway module, and it looks like I jumped ahead. So I mentioned the gateway module. This is the slide where I wanted to talk about it. And so again, just reminding you, there's a gateway module that is free. No login is required. It has 11 units. This is to be used in conjunction with your child abuse and neglect mandatory reporting training that you are already, that your district is already providing and that you're already doing. This is specifically to address the human trafficking components that are spelled out in the Texas Administrative Code. And here on the left, you can see a link to the gateway generally, and then below is a link specifically to this module. And again, this is a really, really good training. It's going to take a deeper dive on a lot of what you heard today and going to help with fulfilling those training requirements. And as I mentioned, we do desire that this would be a one-stop shop for all training, but we're not there yet. So at this point, it's got to be used in conjunction with other training that you have on the child abuse and neglect reporting, mandatory training. I also talked briefly about the importance of child abuse and neglect reporting broadly and how important it is that we are doing our due diligence as mandatory reporters during this time. And so we're had the honor of partnering with the Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas to create a toolkit that is available for all of you. And so in this toolkit, there is a specific one-pager on remote learning environments. This information is available in both English and Spanish. Also within this toolkit is an updated child abuse and neglect no go tell posters. Those are also required to be posted in English and Spanish at student eye level and at least one location, but we would encourage you to make sure that these are widely posted and available. Within this toolkit, there's also a school employee guide for mandatory reporting, and this is available in both English and Spanish, as well as a school administrator guide that is also available. And then there's also a banner that you can use on your webpage as well. So with our partnerships with CACs, we were able to actually take some of the really good resources that they had already made available, make some new resources available, and rebrand and update. CACs also generously offered to print and make these resources available in hard copy. And so you can reach out to your local Children's Advocacy Center to get this information in hard copy. The no-go tell posters that I mentioned, we have updated these. And again, CAC's helped us with this. They did the update to meet new branding standards at the agency. So there's an updated refresh on these posters. We also have them available on the webpage so that you can make sure that you have this posted online. So even if you're not in person, to make sure that online folks know when it comes to your campus, when it comes to your district, where they need to go, and that this information is also readily available. And here you'll see some suggestions for where you could post these posters on campus: in the hallway, the water fountain, the gym, the locker room, the counselor's office. And as I said, we prefer that you put these out, you mass blast these, you make it available. We want students, we want families to know where abuse and neglect can be reported. And it is a requirement at student eye level on English and Spanish that these are posted in 11:17 on every campus. And so if you can help us with reminding your leaders and making sure that these posters are posted, it matters. So thank you. We also have some different web pages at TEA that have information about child abuse and neglect reporting, mandatory requirements. And so this is a screenshot of one of those web pages. Our human trafficking information specifically lives here. And you'll see we do have an email inbox called Preventing Human Trafficking at tea.texas.gov. If you have any questions or any specific follow-up, please do reach out and we would be happy to assist you. TEA is also, we are working to consolidate our web pages. We recognize that there right now are a few different places where information about human trafficking and child abuse prevention lives on our website, which is confusing and not friendly to you all as the end user. And so we are working to make updates to our web pages to make this information a little bit more clear and easy to find and locate. So stay tuned for those updates. We did want to let you know that there are local anti-trafficking task force and coalitions all around the state. And we would encourage you as school leaders to connect in with your local anti-trafficking task force and coalition so you can be up to date on what is happening within your respective communities on this topic. I mentioned the Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas, which is a great place to go for training and information. And if you click on the link here, you can find the regional center that is within your area, and we do encourage you to reach out. I mentioned at the top of the presentation today, our next webinar series upcoming for January, which is Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month. This is where you can find that information. Also, I mentioned our past trainings are recorded on our highly mobile and at-risk division website. And so please do see the link here for that information so that you can go back and see. We did in August, we did an overview of the 61.1051 and all of the requirements. We broke into that in great detail. And then today's presentation will also be stored there as well. And our division is having our next highly mobile and at-risk webinar on January 4th. So just wanted to put a plug in for our division's work as well. We do have some resources that we've made available, specifically an FAQ on child abuse and neglect and human trafficking awareness. This is specifically in light of COVID, questions we were receiving, things that we were learning as this pandemic, was underway. And so that information is available on our webpage. We do have a COVID webpage. We have resources from our division, specifically an FAQ on child abuse, neglect, and human trafficking is located there with specific information. The links that have been mentioned, as well as other resources, are noted there. And as we get to the end of this presentation, wanted to give you all an opportunity to reflect and would like for you to specifically identify one resource that you can use next week and another resource that you can use in the next 72 hours. And for you to also reflect on who you will share this resource with. So if you can take some time to think about a resource that you're going to use and then who you're going to share it with. We want to make sure to get this information out into the hands of many more people. We had about 90 people on today, and we are so grateful that you took time out of your morning to join us and want to get this information out to more folks. So please do help us in sharing this information. And with that, we have about 3 minutes left. We would like to answer any questions that we can in the next few minutes. Also, here is a QR code. We really do value your feedback. If you could take a screenshot of this and provide us some feedback on today's training, as well as this webinar series overall, we want to make sure that we're getting you information that you need and continuously improving in our process. So we welcome your feedback. So with that, I'm going to open it up and look at our chat to see if we have any questions that have come through. Will this PowerPoint be shared? Yes, it will be shared. We will be posting this on our highly mobile and at-risk student program division, and we can send something out to all of the participants today. We'll send the presentation out so that everyone has it. Yes, questions on the screening tool, please send those to Debbie, and her email is in the chat. Yes, the maps and resources are also available on the Title IV State Initiative website as well. It's a great place to go for information as well. Rod's website is very robust. So please do check out that work as well. Can we put the link for the survey in the chat? Monica, can you help us with that? Yes, we can do that.
1 minute.
Great. I'm seeing that you're going to add this into existing training that you have. Excellent. Are there any resources to promote Human Trafficking Month for January? Debbie, do you know of any resources or places that we could refer folks?
The coalitions will definitely have some things. The CAC of Texas will likely have some, and then we'll be pushing out some things as well. So I will get it to you, Kelly. I'm not sure the best way to filter that down, but we can come up with some things as well.
We'll put some resources together, everyone, and we'll make sure to distribute them to this list of folks that participated, as well as through Region 14's networks as well.
And Kelly, sorry, Rod Pruitt, the toolkit that was already provided might have resources and to reemphasize or promote during that January that
excellent.
you mentioned already.
That's a great point. Just actually using the month of January to promote the toolkit is a great idea as well. Great. The evaluation link has been posted. Thank you, Monica. Okay, and we are right at 11:30, so we are right at time. And we wish you all a very happy holiday. Thank you for joining us to talk about this important topic. And we look forward to seeing you next month in January when we're going to be taking a deeper dive on internet safety. If you have any questions, any additional feedback for us, please do reach out. And again, thank you for joining us this morning. And with that, this concludes our presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.